When I saw the first gameplay reveal trailer for Evil West, I was pretty interested. It seemed to have a mix of stuff. Saw some launchers tossed in there, you know. But because of that and a few other things I noticed, I was pretty looking forward to checking out for myself and see what else they had. But first, this is Combat Overview. In this series I go over the general controls, to the game's main mechanic or mechanics, who or what we use those tools on, and seeing how it all comes together. Bit more in depth, but that's what I do. Alright, Evil West is an action game with a mix of melee and shooter mechanics, which is pretty cool. Last time I've seen this was Killer is Dead, some 10 years back. So yeah, glad to see the concept done once again. So let's get started with the basics. R1 you'll punch, doing a little combo. Pretty standard. But like that there's a later upgrade similar to Arkham, where timing your punches as the last one connects will do extra damage. Great incentive to have more rhythmic and controlled inputs instead of mashing away. And even the classic staple is here. By holding R1 you'll launch an enemy, letting you do some juggles with punches or with their guns, which we'll get into a bit later. If you hold forward and R1 at the same time, you'll do that launcher and then automatically follow up with the Superman punch to send him away. This is useful to toss him into hazards like spiked pillars, off a cliff, or can even send him into larger enemies to help keep him in check. Now into the gunplay side, some things you need to know first is ammo is infinite and they'll reload on its own. And some things do run on cooldowns, which I'm sure you might think is pretty limiting, you know, since having timers dictate your options kind of thing. I guess it can, right? The chances of that happening can be there. But once you see how many options were given and tools to play around with at any given moment, it might help change your mind. Okay, so the first gun is the revolver. To use it, just tap R2, or you can hold it to fan the hammer for some successive shots, which is how you do the launcher follow-ups. It's not super damaging and more of a quick option to do chip damage. We also have a rifle, which can only be used while aiming with L2. This lets you get those more precise shots that the revolver just doesn't allow you to do. Now, once the game gave me the option to aim, the first thing I did was give it the Resident Evil 4 test. I aimed at limbs to see if it affects them in any way, like tripping or will turn them around, just anything that will affect their state. But nothing too stand out, but they still have skilled shot opportunities for you to look out for. So as you fight, you'll notice enemies will have this yellow circle appear on them. This is a weak spot, and shooting this will do extra damage and sometimes quick takedowns. It's kind of like a gun-based parry pretty much, because this lets you know they're setting up an attack and they're vulnerable for a powerful counter. It'll do crit damage and sometimes leave them open for a follow-up combo if you punish them before that attack comes out. Pretty cool. We're also given a crossbow, which is a good in-between option. It can both single shot and be automatic. It has more ammo, which means more shots compared to the rifle. It doesn't have the rifle's high damage on an individual shot, and it doesn't have as much range for precision aiming as the rifle. And unlike the revolver, you can aim and focus on a target, but it won't be able to do quick shots that it can. So it's not as strong against small tracking enemies like these Red Skulls, for example. But yeah, it's more of a well-rounded option. We have a shotgun on square, which is good for crowd control. It can even be upgraded to have this counter property to it. Shoot someone right before they attack and more damage. The flamethrower is good for damage over time. Easy way to do damage over a crowd. And a quick little tip for it, it's a great way to take off these bug-like buff armor that's on them. And yep, every Western game for sure has to have this. The last gun we get is the minigun. It needs time to coil up and your movement is slowed, but that trade-off is for massive damage. So you can see we got a few things to choose from, depending on enemy types, ways to maneuver enemies around, counter certain things and all that. Just options upon options for whatever situation pretty much, and yeah, solid stuff so far. For defenses, holding L1 will block. There are some limits to it you should know. You can't move while guarding and it doesn't stay up even if you hold it. It will lower on its own after some time. Now that means we have to time it, which yep means we have a parry. Doing this will stun that enemy, letting you get cooler pummel attack follow-up on him. Okay, so the reason why you can't move is because while blocking, moving forward or back with the left thumbstick will either zoom you towards an enemy or yank him in. Great way to either escape a group or bring someone off a high spot and just to lay the beat down on them. Triangle is the best crowd control option we have. It'll stun small and larger enemies, even bosses, letting you do a little mash combo on them. X will dodge. The first press will do this quick little sidestep, and double press for this roll to cover more distance. Now both of these options have iframes on them, a bit tight of a window, but as long as you time it, you'll be good. and it even cancels what you're doing, so again, just a solid defense option. And if you dodge forward and punch, you'll lunge forward at him with an attack to get in close and to start your combo. Something you gotta look out for are these unblockable attacks, shown by them being completely orange. Can't block, of course, but you can dodge out of the way. But if you want to style on them, pressing R3 would do this kick. It's a disruptor basically. When you see them wind up for that unblockable attack, you can kick to stop them, letting you continue your pressure. Your kick even cancels on a dime, which makes it, again, a really good counter tool. It requires you to know enemies' patterns to be able to react to time. And it kind of reminded me of Neo 2's brute burst counters. So yeah, I liked it quite a bit. But hey, if you get hit too much, you can heal a decent amount of health with a little heal cooldown. Onto our HUD. Red meter is our health. Both sides show us our weapons and all. This stuff we just went over. Now these batteries is our meter for little powered up attacks you can unlock later on. The one we start off with is this little crowd control slam using a single battery charge. But if you hold on to these, once you have 3, you can go into this powered up state, zigzagging between enemies, dealing major damage for a limited time. You'll even be invulnerable during it and on its activation. So you can use this as a get out of jail free card or to continue your pressure. To fill up these batteries, everything pretty much adds to it. Your punches, parries, your kick interruptions, finishers. Just stay on top of them using all the tools and it'll fill up constantly with no issue. Oh yeah, speaking of which, finishers. So when an enemy is real low on health, they'll stand still and blink yellow. Go up to them and attack. You'll do this instant kill finish, giving you some health afterwards. Which, yep, you'll be invulnerable during that little animation too. Now some enemies we'll take down are these jobbers who will always approach the same way, attacking with their right arm. Some who will stay back and lob bouncing projectiles at you. They'll try to lock down that area you're in and just punish you for staying still for too long. Werewolf-like enemies who will rush you down. And since their approach is about being fast, it means they'll dodge most of your shots, which leaves it to hand-to-hand kind of fight. And they really like to do unblockable attacks. But hey, they're not fast enough to sidestep fire now, are they? We have big dudes with shields. They'll either slam down sending waves at you from afar, or they'll rush you down. You can punch that shield of theirs to break it, or use a shotgun to heavily damage it, pretty much breaking it in one shot. Or you can just attack the unprotected back. So yeah, these enemies have a few options about them to learn and figure out, which leads to different approaches to taking them down. And the bosses follow the exact same rules as everything else, so if you catch on to the patterns and can react in time, you can get big damage follow-ups or prevent them from setting up their own attack. It's really solid cast to fight all around. One little thing I'll say is that enemies do attack you no matter what, if they're off screen or not, which is You'd be giving a little heads up that they're doing that, but the game can get a little wild enough to miss these little signs. Wish we had a little quick 180 turn because of this. Just something to ease up on those surrounded moments a little. If there was ever a problem where it led to unseen game overs constantly. So take that as you will. But yeah, that's Evil West. It's super fun. Not only because you're playing as this monster slaying cowboy, having you go into these crazy situations until your next fight, which you know is about to come up because of these wide open areas, which I'm always happy to see them because that's when you know combat's about to happen, which is just solidly put together. Every button has its own weapon or attack, just distinct actions with own unique uses to counter certain enemy setups or to start something of your own. From launchers, crowd control options, parrying enemies left and right, even interrupting unblockable attacks at a moment's notice, and lots more to keep yourself on the aggressive. I'm glad they focused on this over everything because it just makes this pure, non-stop action-focused experience with little to no downtime, fight after fight, straight to new areas, which all have their own look to them too, giving a nice little backdrop while you fight. So yeah, just encountering new enemies, finding new upgrades for your weapons, leveling up, unlocking extra perks, and getting those brand new toys to add to your ever-growing arsenal throughout the entire game. This is what I like to see and play especially. In broad strokes, it reminded me a bit of Killer is Dead and Mad World, mixed kind of going on, but of course with its own spin on top of it. Yeah, fun time, and I think for sure you should check it out for yourself sometime.